IP rotation is one of the most misunderstood concepts in web scraping and proxy management. Use it correctly and you can run massive data collection operations without triggering rate limits or bans. Use it incorrectly, especially in account-based workflows, and it's one of the fastest ways to get flagged. This video explains what IP rotation actually is, how it works at the network level, when it helps, and when it actively causes problems. Understanding this distinction is what separates operators who scale cleanly from those who keep cycling through providers looking for fixes that don't exist. So what is IP rotation? It's the practice of cycling through multiple IP addresses across a series of requests rather than sending everything from one static IP. Instead of one address making 10,000 requests to a website, those requests are distributed across a pool of IPs. So each address only makes a fraction of the total. From the target server's perspective, the traffic looks like it's coming from many different users rather than one automated source. That's the core mechanism that makes rotation useful for high volume scraping. Rotation can happen in several ways. Per request rotation means a new IP for every single HTTP request. Maximum distribution, zero session continuity. Time-based rotation means the IP changes every n minutes, regardless of request count. That's a balance between distribution and short-term consistency. Session-based rotation keeps the IP fixed for the duration of a defined session, then rotates when a new session begins. This is what we call sticky sessions, and I've covered this extensively in another video. The right rotation model depends entirely on what you're doing, not on what sounds more sophisticated. That's the key thing to understand. Let me explain how this works at the network level. A proxy provider maintains a pool of IP addresses. These might be data center IPs hosted in server farms, residential IPs routed through home internet connections, or mobile IPs assigned by carrier networks. When you connect through a rotating proxy, a routing layer assigns you a different IP from that pool on each rotation trigger. For data center and residential proxies, this routing is managed at the provider's infrastructure layer. For mobile proxies, real SIM cards on carrier networks are involved. The IP you get is a genuine mobile carrier address which carries a completely different trust profile than a data center IP. The target server sees each request as originating from a different address. Unless other signals give away the pattern, identical headers, timing, behavior, the requests look like independent users. This is the technical basis for why rotation works for scraping, and this is important. The IP type matters. A pool of data center IPs on known hosting ASNs still looks automated even with rotation because the ASNs themselves are flagged. A pool of genuine mobile carrier IPs carries the trust of real devices by default. The rotation mechanism is the same. The outcome is different because the IP quality is different. So when does IP rotation actually work well? It's the right tool for stateless high-volume tasks where session continuity isn't required. Public web scraping, scraping public product pages, pricing data, search engine results, or any content that doesn't require a login. The target site can't link request 1 to request 5,000 if they come from 5,000 different IPs. Rate limiting becomes much harder to enforce. SERP tracking and SEO monitoring, checking search rankings for hundreds of keywords across multiple locations. Each query is independent. There's no persistent session. Rotation distributes the load and avoids triggering search engine bot detection. Price monitoring at scale. E-commerce price monitoring across large catalogs. Each product page check is a discrete request. Rotation lets you check thousands of URLs without any single IP being throttled or blocked. Ad verification. Checking what ads are served to users in different regions, on different carrier networks at different times. Each check simulates a fresh user view. Rotation across a geographic IP pool is exactly what this requires. In all these cases, the task is stateless. No login, no session persistence, no account at risk. Rotation is the optimal strategy. Now here's where most operators make expensive mistakes. Rotation causes problems. Not just ineffectiveness, but actual problems in any workflow involving authenticated sessions or account-based operations. Account, login, and management. Platforms record the IP at login. When subsequent actions in the same session come from a different IP, the security system flags it as anomalous. The signal is identical to what they'd see from credential stuffing, account takeover, or shared account access. The result is verification prompts, temporary locks, or permanent bans. Not because the IP was bad, but because the IP changed mid-session. Multi-account operations. Running multiple accounts with a rotating proxy pool creates IP overlap. If account A used IP 203.0.1113.5 yesterday and account B uses it today, that shared IP history creates a correlation signal. Platforms can link accounts that have touched the same IP, even across different sessions, different days, different devices. For multi-account work, each account needs a dedicated sticky IP. Not a rotating pool, not a shared pool, a dedicated IP that only that account uses. This is a fundamentally different requirement from scraping. Using a rotating setup for multi-account work is one of the most common causes of account bans we see. Checkout and transaction flows. E-commerce platforms and payment processors treat IP changes mid-checkout as fraud signals. A session that starts on one IP and completes a purchase from another raises the same flags as a stolen card being used from an unfamiliar location. Rotation is incompatible with transaction workflows by design. Platforms with behavioral fingerprinting go even further. Some analyze behavioral consistency, the sequence of actions, timing patterns, session history. Even if you rotate IPs perfectly, inconsistent behavior across sessions can still trigger detection. IP rotation addresses the network layer only. It does nothing for behavior, device fingerprint, or timing signals. So how do you choose between rotation and sticky sessions? It's not about which is better, it's about which matches the task. Rotation maximizes IP distribution across requests. It's optimal when you have no persistent state to protect and you need to avoid rate limits at scale. Sticky sessions maintain a single IP for the duration of a defined session. They're required whenever session continuity matters. Account actions, authenticated workflows, anything where the platform tracks state across requests. The mistake most operators make is defaulting to rotation because it sounds more sophisticated or defaulting to sticky sessions because they heard it was safer. The correct choice is determined by the task, not a general rule. And the proxy type matters too. Rotation works differently depending on what's actually in that pool. Data center proxies are fast and cheap. IPs originate from hosting providers and data centers. Even with rotation, the ASNs are recognizable as non-residential, non-mobile sources. Sites that check ASN reputation will still flag rotated data center traffic on pattern-aware targets. Residential proxies are sourced from real home internet connections via ISP networks. Higher trust than data center because the ASN belongs to a legitimate ISP. Rotating residential pools are the most common choice for general scraping. The limitation is that they're often shared across many users in a provider's pool. IP history contamination is a real risk. Mobile proxies are assigned by mobile carrier networks, routed through real SIM cards. These carry the highest inherent trust because carrier NAT means thousands of real users share the same IP range. Platforms can't aggressively block mobile ASNs without blocking legitimate users. Mobile proxies can be used in both rotating and sticky configurations, which makes them flexible across both scraping and account-based workflows. Let me cover the most common rotation mistakes. The single most common mistake is using rotation for account work. If you're managing social media accounts, e-commerce seller accounts, ad accounts, or any authenticated session, rotation will cause problems. The fix is dedicated sticky IPs, one per account, not shared across accounts. Rotating too aggressively on session-aware targets. Even for scraping, some targets track session state using cookies and session tokens. If you rotate mid-session on these targets, you get flagged, not because of the IP change itself, but because the session token now doesn't match the IP it was issued to. Ignoring IP pool quality. Rotation across a low-quality pool of previously flagged or heavily shared IPs doesn't solve the detection problem, it multiplies it. You end up touching IPs with bad history on every request. The pool quality determines whether rotation is effective, not the rotation mechanism itself. Treating rotation as the only layer of protection. IP is one signal. Modern bot detection evaluates browser fingerprint, headers, timing patterns, behavioral consistency. Rotation addresses the IP signal only. If the other signals are bot-like, rotation provides limited protection. So here's how to configure IP rotation correctly. The configuration depends on your use case. For stateless scraping, Use per request or time-based rotation. Every 1 to 5 minutes is common. Match request headers and user agent to the IP type. A mobile IP should use a mobile user agent. Monitor response codes. 429 means rate limited, 403 means blocked. Those signal you need slower rotation or a larger pool. Randomize request timing to avoid mechanical patterns. For session-aware scraping, use session-based rotation. 1 IP per scraping session, rotated between sessions. Respect cookies. Don't discard session tokens mid-scrape. Set session duration long enough to complete a full scraping task before rotating. For account-based work, do not use standard rotation. Use dedicated sticky IPs. 1 per account, never shared. Set session duration to cover the full work session. Only rotate to a new IP when starting fresh with that account, ideally with a clean browser profile reset. Never reuse an IP that's been used by a different account. Now let me address some common questions about rotation. Does IP rotation prevent all scraping blocks? No. Rotation makes IP-level rate limiting much harder to enforce, but modern bot detection goes way beyond IP. Browser fingerprinting, behavioral analysis, header inspection can identify automated traffic even with perfect rotation. Rotation is a necessary layer for high-volume scraping, not a sufficient one. How many IPs do I need for rotation to be effective? It depends on request volume and target sensitivity. Rough rule: the pool size should be large enough that no single IP exceeds the target site's informal rate limit threshold. For lightly protected targets, even 10 to 20 IPs can handle moderate volume. For aggressive bot detection, you need hundreds to thousands of clean IPs rotating across requests. Can I use rotating mobile proxies for account work? Not with standard per request or time-based rotation. For account work, mobile proxies need to be configured in sticky mode, a dedicated IP per account that stays consistent for the full session. Mobile proxies are the right proxy type for account work because of carrier trust levels. But they need to be in sticky configuration, not rotating. What's the difference between rotation and IP cycling? They refer to the same concept. Some providers use cycling for slower interval-based rotation and rotation for per-request changes, but there's no universal standard. Always check the provider's documentation to understand what their rotation model actually does. Do mobile proxies rotate IPs automatically? Carrier networks do naturally reassign mobile IPs over time. This is separate from proxy provider rotation logic. A good provider gives you control. Sticky mode locks the IP for a defined session duration. Rotating mode cycles through the pool. You should always know which mode you're using and match it to your use case. The bottom line is this: IP rotation is a powerful tool with a specific job: distributing requests across IPs to avoid rate limiting on stateless scraping targets. For that job, it works well, especially with a clean pool of mobile or residential IPs. Outside that job, particularly for account-based or authenticated workflows, rotation causes the problems it's supposed to solve. The correct alternative is sticky sessions, dedicated IPs per session, per account, per identity. Understanding which mode to use and why is the foundation of a proxy setup that actually scales without constantly triggering bans and losing accounts. If you're building a scraping pipeline and trying to figure out whether rotation is the right choice for your use case, this framework should help. For a complete guide covering both scraping and multi-account setups, head to dataresearchtools.com. Subscribe for more deep dives into proxy strategy and web scraping. And next video, I'm covering the specific proxy type comparison: when to use data center, residential and mobile proxies. See you there.